of repeated viewing, and the recording has now begun, Robert. Thank you. I'll bring in Julie and call for the said written apologies, please.
Thank you and good morning, members. Provost Jim Todd.
Yeah.
Councillor Stephen Canning.
Thanks.
Councillor Ellen Friel.
I'm here, thank you.
Councillor John McFadden. Councillor McFadden. Yeah, I can see you online. Councillor John McGee.
Yep.
Councillor Elaine Cowan.
Here.
Councillor Maureen Mackay.
Present.
Councillor David Richardson.
Present, Julie.
Councillor James Adams. Councillor Lillian Jones.
Good morning.
Thank you. Councillor Ian Linton.
Yeah.
Councillor Douglas Reid.
Yeah.
Councillor Graham Barton.
Yep.
I have apologies from Councillors Graham Boyd and Councillor Barry Douglas. Councillor Neil Ingram.
Present.
Councillor Peter Maben.
Present.
Councillor Claire Maitland.
Here.
Councillor Beverly Clark.
Here.
Councillor Sally Cogley.
Here.
Councillor Kevin McGregor.
Yeah, thanks.
Councillor Linda Holland.
Here, thank you.
Deputy Provost Claire Leach.
Here.
Councillor William Lennox.
Morning, here.
Councillor Alison Simmons.
Here.
I have an apology from Councillor Billy Crawford. Councillor June Kyle.
Present.
Councillor Jim McMahon.
Yeah, Julie, thanks.
Thank you. Councillor Neil Watts.
Present, Julie.
Thank you. Councillor Drew Filson.
Yep.
I have an apology from Councillor Jennifer Hogg. Councillor Elaine Stewart.
I'm here, Julie, thanks.
Thank you.
Thanks, members. Thanks, Julie. I'd like to welcome Dr. Sukaboy Das, who is the IJB Vice Chair, to the meeting. You're very welcome, sir, and we're going to have the presentation later on. Thank you for coming along. Folks, just quickly, if I can, we had the wonderful day, 2 days of the Dean Castle official opening, 31st of March. Castle's looking tremendous. The work that has been carried out is to a very high standard, and I enjoyed meeting the members of the De Walden family who came up, and they were really, really impressed with what they saw, and they actually said that the castle and all its artefacts are in very good hands. There was also the Boyd family, who have links to the Boyds of the Dean, came from America. And well done to Annika and the team. Everyone has worked very hard, and already there's a lot of things going on at the castle through the summer, so please enjoy the Dean Castle. Closer to my heart, MCS Motorcycles along the road at Crooked Home. They had Nick Sanders, who's a fascinating gentleman. He has traversed the world 8 times on 2 wheels, once on a bicycle and 7 times on a motorcycle, and he holds umpteen records. He holds the record for the longest travelable in one go road, which is right at the very top of Alaska, right down to Patagonia, and he did it in 18 days. My goodness. So it was really good to hear what he had to say, and he was an incredible gentleman. And Leslie from the shop, lovely lassie Leslie, had a wee collection at half time for motor neuron disease, and they raised £310. So well done to the guys and lasses there. We were at the dedication of the restoration of the Harrison and Harrison organ at St Joseph's Church, Sunday the 16th of April. It was built in 1903, same year as Harley Davidson, and it was incredible to hear the sounds that haven't been heard in the organ because some pipes were blocked off. It was a year in restoration, and they had guest organists there. Andrew Reid, who plays at Westminster Abbey, came up and gave a brilliant organ. I was in there for 3.5 hours, and it was incredible. I thought it was at a Genesis concert. That's how good the sound was. It was incredible. And Father McGrattan has openly invited everyone to go along. They're having recitals all through the summer, so please check out Father McGrattan and go along and be absolutely blown away. Another great day at Park School. They're always good, and this was the Skills Academy launch. The youngsters were very enthusiastic and proud of the hard work that they've put in to get their businesses up and running. We had a lovely morning with the best Lord Lieutenant in Scotland, Iona MacDonald, and other invited guests. Excuse me. I went round and saw all of the businesses, and we ended up in a barista for cake and coffee, which was a good way to bring proceedings to a close. I was up in Edinburgh. I've been up in Edinburgh a lot the last few months. And this is the Army Cadet Charitable Trust ceremony of beating the retreat at the Edinburgh Castle along the Esplanade. And well done to all of them. And it was good to see some Ayrshire cadets up there as well. It was absolutely brilliant. And there's 2 cadets get awarded their trophies, the male and female cadets. And it was great to be in the Great Hall again. To see Ensign Ewart's portrait up on the wall, he, of course, was the chap from Kilmarnock that captured the French standard at Waterloo. King Charles III coronation event at HQ, Friday the 5th of May. In conjunction with Royal British Legion, we celebrated the coronation of King Charles by conducting a flag-raising event here. And in the afternoon, we had a wonderful afternoon tea in the courtyard. And thanks to Mark and all the team with Chris, all of the veterans were delighted. And it was a good way to celebrate a wonderful day. Cars on the campus, again, it was the Ayrshire Classic Car Club. 312 entries they had this year, which is an absolute record. And there's a Provost Choice class, and I chose a 1964 Triumph Herald. It helped that it was blue and white, but it was absolutely beautiful. And the organiser managed to raise over £720 for the Ayrshire Hospice. Well done to them. Closer to home, we've got Laura Tate. A massive congratulations to Laura. A lot of people will know Laura. Works at Park School. Laura has passed her BSL, British Sign Language Level 6, with honours, and is apparently the only person in Scotland to have this degree. So it's a great achievement for Laura, and she's not sitting there. She's going to go on and do more. And can we pass on our best wishes to Councillor Graham Boyd? He's over in Malta now with his dad. There's been a wee health scare, so Graham's over there to hopefully things will work out fine, and there'll be a very successful resolution for there. So we give Graham all our best wishes, and best wishes to Maureen. And our condolences from everyone here, Maureen. And before we go on, this is Katie's last council. And we'll maybe hear from Katie later on at the end if you'd like to say a few words. That would be really kind. Thanks very much, Katie. We wish you all the very best in everything you do. Folks, we're going to go in and carry on with the meeting proper. And the first item of business is declaration of interest. And that's page 3 in your papers. David?
Given the business and agenda promised, I wouldn't expect any declarations, but if any members, as always, know otherwise, now would be the time to put their hand up. But given the item on the agenda, I would not expect any appointments to the IJB are covered by the existing dispensation and don't need to be declared because they're already on the record.
Yeah, thanks for that. I think everybody understands the positions. We've got no declarations. Thanks for that, guys. Item 2 is the previous minutes. I'll hand over to the Deputy Provost.
It was a meeting, the previous council, Provost.
Thanks very much, Deputy Provost, and I second that. Folks, any questions? We're okay, thank you. We're on to the Cabinet Committee minutes. These will be taken on block, and I'll ask the leader to approve.
Moves the correct record, Provost.
Second that, Provost. Thanks, Leader. Deputy Leader. Members, any questions? Nothing online. Thanks, Julie. Thanks, folks. We're going to go on to the East Ayrshire Health and Social Care Partnership. This is the annual review of the strategic plan, and I'll introduce the leader, who's the convener of that committee, to introduce the paper. Thanks, Leader.
Thanks. I think this is the first time we've done this in this format. Really proud of what we're doing in terms of our IGB in Ayrshire, and it has been recognised nationally. I was only on a call yesterday with the new Secretary of State for Health, and our local East Ayrshire IGB was mentioned in a positive light. and really absolutely delighted to see what we're doing. Obviously, in terms of health, we have got many challenges ahead of us, and we're not complacent in many challenges, particularly with some of the national care NCS stuff that's in the parliamentary domain, which has thankfully been paused. But aside all that, really, we've got new boards, some new people involved, loads of new energy, and Dr. Das has been absolutely great to see his contributions that he's making, and under the stewardship, much like Craig MacArthur, we're doing well and taking over the reins from the chief executive. So just introduce Sukhmoy Das with a report.
No, thanks. Craig's going to give us a presentation, folks. And may I ask that if you have any questions, any points, please write them down, and we'll get Craig to hopefully answer questions if needed at the end of the presentation. Over to Craig.
Thanks, Provost, and thank you, Leader. So, as the Leader said, he's currently the chair of the IJB, but the standing orders relating to the committee itself requires that to roll over on a 2-yearly basis. So the Leader will step down as chair in June, and Dr. Das, who's with us today, will assume the chair of the IJB in June in terms of the standard, the way that the IJB works. So it's good to have both of them present today, just to hear the presentation, to be engaged in it, which is, from my perspective, I'm really grateful for them being here as well. So thank you for that. Presentation today, I think rather than just talking through the report, I thought it might be helpful just to do a bit of a brief presentation, just talking about the strategic plan, some of the achievements over the last year, and some of the opportunities and challenges going forward. And as Provost has said, happy to take any questions at the end of it that any members might have. So in terms of the strategic plan, it was agreed a few years ago now, and it spans the period 2021 through to 2030. And it says quite clearly within the plan what we will do as a health and social care partnership, as agreed by the IJB, and it's noted in the slide here. So we'll move support closer to families, homes and communities, essentially trying to get things out of hospital, out of institutions, and get that support much closer to where people stay. Help people get better physically and mentally. Work with families and communities to help them achieve the things that matter most. Find new and better ways for supports to work together. Tackle poverty and stigma. Help make people safe, and use new technology to make support better. So these strategic intentions have been there for a wee while. We had other various iterations of engagement, which we'll talk about as we go through the presentation. We're just checking in with people that these are still the right strategic intentions. We're still wanting to do these things in terms of how we deliver our services. And I think what we'll hear and see quite clearly is that people do still absolutely support that and recognise that that's the way forward, that we want to absolutely deliver services. So within that strategic plan, there's a range of commissioning intentions listed there. There's 6 now. There was previously 4 the last time we reviewed and updated the strategic plan a couple of years ago. The final 2 there were added, so Safe and Protected and Digital Connections were new ones that were added in there. So Safe and Protected is very much about the public protection issues, but also our staff, the wellbeing of our staff as well. Although caring for our workforce is in there, the Safe and Protected, it kind of straddles both parts in there. And Digital Connections is very much recognising around about technology-enabled care, the way we work and how we need to do things differently. It needs to be a firm part of our intentions and how we actually move forward as well. So those 2 were added in as a consequence of the significant engagement process that we went through the last time we made a big change to the strategic plan, and those remain absolutely our intentions now for the next few years as well. Members will recall we've spoken often about caring for Ayrshire, which is the model that the NHS Ayrshire and Arran board are taking forward in terms of how they will transform health services into the future. So for us, in terms of caring for East Ayrshire, the model of care that's described on the slide here is very much how we want to take things forward. So the caring for Ayrshire model talks about the right care in the right place at the right time. And for us, as I say, this model here very much describes that. So Dr. Crawford McGuffey, who's the medical director of the board, has given a number of presentations around Ayrshire, around about what this means and what it looks like, and he describes it, and could describe it much better than I. But if you look at life expectancy in 1915 compared to where we are in 2015, so 100 years later, life expectancy for a male has went from 48 to 79. That's in Scotland. For females, from 54 to 82. So people living much longer, much healthier lives. but when you listen to Crawford, he'll then talk about the impact of how that's happened, and there's only a very small proportion of those extra years is due to medical advances. The vast majority of it is due to other influences round about better housing, round about education, round about economics, and people having jobs, etc. So that's the big driving factor round about better life expectancy. So in terms of caring for Ayrshire and caring for East Ayrshire, this isn't all about health and social care and actually doing different models of health delivery. It's that whole system approach and how we need to actually tackle things right across our communities. And we're in a really good place in East Ayrshire to do that. Really good relationships, partnership working between education and ourselves, between housing ourselves. Some of the housing models that we've seen come online in the last number of years have been incredibly successful, and that's something we absolutely need to and want to take forward into the future as well. But as I say, the model there talks about the health and care system at the heart of it, and then it looks at people being looked after at home with self-care, etc., or in a homely environment. So that could be care homes, for example, or supported accommodation. It looks at primary care, which is how people interact with doctors, dentists, pharmacy, etc., and how that needs to change into the future as well. We've got the health and wellbeing hub models that we're trying to develop, one in Doon Valley. We'll talk a wee bit about that later on, and potentially some others across other community areas as well, which is absolutely, again, a priority. But only in extreme circumstances and the people are by exception should they be actually accessing services within acute hospitals. So the acute hospital should be like the pinnacle of that sort of care pyramid, and that's where we need to change and get to over the next number of years. So in terms of the IJB, and this isn't meant to be a history lesson, it's maybe just helpful to remind people in terms of the integration principles that were laid out within the Public Bodies Joint Working Act 2014. And the National Care Service essentially could potentially change some of this, but at the point in time now, this is the integration principles that we are working to. So now our IJB has been operational since April 2015. The three Ayrshire IJBs were the first in Scotland to become operational. The vast majority in Scotland were a year later. It was April 2016 before they came into being. So ours kicked off in 2015. The integration scheme is the legal document as approved by ministers that lays out all of what we do, how we do it, and a legal basis for it. That requires to be reviewed on a 5-yearly basis. We are currently, it's already been reviewed once, we're currently kicked off a second formal review of the integration scheme, so we can expect to see a report brought back to Council in June, just with the formality around about the timescales and the process that we'll adopt to take that through in terms of the review of the scheme. But essentially, the integration principles laid out within the Public Bodies Joint Working Act talks about improved wellbeing. It talks about having to reflect and consider different needs, characteristics and circumstances, which you'd always want to do. This isn't about one size fits all. It's very much about local needs and circumstances. It's looking at how you can integrate services from the perspective of those who use them, not about what we as a system want to do, very much about what patients and citizens would expect to receive and how they would want to actually get those services delivered. An awful lot around about respect, dignity, equality and human rights, and the National Care Service again has a big focus on that. The FELA review prior to it again had a huge focus on human rights. To me, the next one's really important, planned and led locally with communities fully engaged. So a huge part of our work and what we do around about this is the bit about community engagement. It's about talking to our communities. It's about talking to service users. You'll see further on in the presentation, we had a number of local conversations this year just to test the water with our communities about what we're currently doing, what we might need to do into the future, and how it felt to them and what they wanted to see different round about that. So the whole part round about local engagement with communities is really, really important. Public protection and safety will need to run through, and always has run through, the very heart of what we do, about keeping our children safe through child protection, keeping our adults safe, about violence against women, MAPA. So we have a whole range of formal arrangements in place to do that, and that remains really, really important for us. Again, the integration principles talk about being anticipatory and preventative and making the best use of all assets and resources. And I think within East Ayrshire, certainly that's something we excel at and we do really, really well. The preventative approaches can sometimes take a long time to actually show the difference that it's making in a healthcare system. I think what we're good at is actually putting those approaches in place. People being able to see the opportunities over the longer term to make a difference now, make the investment, and then hopefully see that starting to come through over the longer term. So again, it's something that we do and do really, really well. That brings us to the annual review of the strategic plan. So essentially we went out, spoke to people, to staff, to service users, to the wider communities, to the public, and essentially the main questions were, is our strategic plan from 2021 through to 30, does it remain fit for purpose? Do those 6 commissioning intentions that I mentioned at the start provide the right focus for us in East Ayrshire? And are there any other priorities that should be included within the strategic plan at this time? So those were the main questions that we started to ask people when we were engaging with them over the last number of months. And essentially the answers to the questions were, yes, that is fit for purpose. Yes, the intentions do provide the right focus for East Ayrshire at this point in time. And in terms of are there any other priorities we should include, lots of people have got lots of ideas around about where the priorities sit. But I think in general terms, the priorities that we've identified are wide enough that we can actually tag on everything that people are talking to us about and telling us can be associated with each of those priorities in there. So at this point in time, we believe that the priorities remain fit for purpose and appropriate to allow us to deliver services into the future. That doesn't mean that it's now there and it's fit and remain untouched until 2030. Those local conversations should hopefully take place on an annual basis. They were paused during COVID for obvious reasons. We had to try and do engagement in a slightly different way. So this was the first time in a number of years we've had that opportunity to go out to communities, to meet with people and actually have that face-to-face conversation, which was really, really good. And it's certainly something we'd want to continue on an annual basis as we do go forward. So local conversations that I've mentioned, I know a number of elected members managed to get along to some of these events as well, which was really good to see people there and to engage in the various activities that were taking place. So there was 3 local events took place, one in Kilmarnock, it's Kentigern's Church, one in Cumnock up in Nether Third, and the final one in Galston. So those took place over 3 consecutive Fridays. The middle one in Cumnock coincided with a bank holiday, a school weekend. So there was loads of kids at that one, which was brilliant. It was a totally different atmosphere. So each of the 3 were all quite different in terms of how what it felt like and how people were engaging. But as I say, the middle one with loads of kids was fascinating. Some of the questions there were very different than we were getting from other places. Within those events, there was a range of workshops took place as well. One round about adult support and protection and self-neglect. One round about AHP supports, what that meant for people and how they could access them. And one round about health improvement generally. So it was, again, a really good opportunity for people to engage with some of the services that were sometimes a bit harder to, or for people maybe didn't understand what was there, how they could access them and how we could support through some of those challenging areas. Again, each of the events had a frequently asked question, a question and answer session at the end of it. So a panel, which myself and a number of senior colleagues sat on, which was interesting and challenging and at the same time terrifying sometimes too, in terms of the questions you're getting, because it absolutely wasn't scripted. So some of the questions were from the floor were quite difficult, but that's good. A number of questions that we didn't get to on the day, so folk asking questions, we just didn't have time to answer them all. So we took them all away, wrote them up in terms of a series of frequently asked questions that were pulled into a paper. Those, as I said, been formally written up, and I think they're with the comms team just now, just to turn them into almost a glossy document that can then be put on the website and shared with people who came along. So if they did ask questions on the day or were interested in particular topics, they should hopefully be able to hear that back to them now in relation to the particular challenges or questions that they were raising. So a number of the key, because just the text on there is quite small, but some of the feedback we got from them, as I say, has been consolidated into that document. What's going well? Everybody comes together, improved partnership working, mental health and suicide services and awareness, pharmacy services always go above and beyond, recovery services are increasingly prevalent across East Ayrshire, and this one again struck me, the focus of doing the right thing for people, not being overly concerned about the cost of it. Clearly, we wanted to try and understand what could we do better as well. And interestingly, some of the things I've just mentioned there in terms of what's going well, other people were saying they felt it could be better. So we recognise that there is a difference of opinion across some areas here. So some of the what could be better from feedback was round about access to mental health supports. A lot of the activities that take place are based in Kilmarnock, not being able to access doctors or GPs for an appointment, and local people not always being aware of the services that are available within their local areas. And then the final question we asked people round about this was what in terms of improvements would they like to see, what ideas do they have for improvement. People were keen that their feedback was taken into consideration. We listened to them and we acted on the feedback we were getting. There was a lot of opportunities people felt around about digital accessibility, digital support, the use of digital for assessments, etc., which is something we're keen to take forward. So that was really good. Again, a lot of feedback around about one-stop shops, single points of contact, so that people don't need to tell their story multiple times. They could tell it once and know that would be fed into the various parts of the system. And again, the final one for me, which was quite interesting, was around about local people having more of a say and being more involved in decision making. And I think those local conversations are a start to allowing that to be a reality. Turning now into the financial and system pressures, which I know members in here will absolutely recognise and understand, because it's the same types of system pressures that we're seeing across the whole of local government and indeed the public sector. So there are a whole range of ongoing financial challenges that we within the IJB are facing, have faced for a few years, and those continue to be very, very challenging going forward. We know for the people, the services that we provide, the people that we provide services to, the cost of living crisis is becoming increasingly challenging for our service users. It's also becoming increasingly challenging for a whole range of our staff as well, and we recognise we need to respond to that in different ways. We have, as part of the budget setting process and the review of the strategic plan, had a very critical review of our spending priorities, our commitments, the timescales round about that, just to make sure that what we're doing remain the right things, and they are affordable within the context of the financial settlements that we have. And the final point of all of those reviews, etc., was the IJB budget for 23-24 was taken to and approved by the IJB on the 29th of March. That was part of a series of documents, the same as which you're considering today, in relation to the strategic plan, the workforce plan, financial asset management plan, property asset management plan, and the common strategy. So trying to look at it as a whole in totality and recognise where the financial pressures lay within there. We are already seeing, even this early in the financial year, significant strain across some key areas, which we always anticipated. There are no more COVID monies coming to the council or to the NHS boards. So the additional monies that we got over the last few years, that has all stopped, but some of those pressures remain. So in terms of service delivery, we recognise that some of those demand pressures are absolutely still there, but the additional funding to cover it no longer remains. So we're having to manage that within our own resources now. Scottish Government funding, we absolutely recognise, is under significant and extreme pressure as well around about all of our services. We've seen the Audit Scotland report yesterday in terms of local government services and the challenges that presents going forward, and absolutely health and social care falls very much within that as well. We do have some reserves, similar to the council. We aspire to have an uncommitted reserve of around, or certainly a minimum of 2% of our annual revenue budget to allow for extreme events that might happen during the year and ability to respond to that. So we are sitting just about the 2% level, so we're not awash with money, but we do have a bit of flexibility in there. It does give us the opportunity to make decisions partly through the year and have some time to implement them and recognise the innovation round about it can be taken forward. Notwithstanding that, when we agreed the budget for this year, we did identify there's about an £8 million gap in relation to pressures that we'd have to fund in the year we've just now started. We had additional funding from both NHS and council in relation to additional government funding, amounted to about £3.5 million, which means there's the remaining gap in there of around £4.5 million had to be absorbed within existing budgets and savings made to allow the budget to be balanced. As I say, that's particularly challenging at a time where we know the demand pressures are going through the roof. I mentioned Scottish Government funding there. There's a few areas during the last year where, again, that presented a real challenge to us round about the Alcohol and Drugs Partnership, for example, where there was a realignment of funding partly through the year. The intention or the presumption is that while we were expected to spend our balances first of all before additional funding would be presented to us, we've yet to receive formal notification or confirmation that will absolutely be the case. We continue to pursue civil servants to make sure that can be confirmed to us. But at this point in time, that presents a significant risk to us going forward in terms of the services into the future, and we'll continue to lobby the government to make sure that commitment can absolutely be given to us. Excuse me. So moving on to a few of the key achievements over the last wee while. There's a number of logos up there. I was going to talk about each of them, but I fear I'm about to burst into a fit of coughing, so I'll try to keep it kind of brief round about them. The HEART model at the top there, this is a new wellbeing model for our children, young people. Recently received an IEASY award at a UK national level in relation to the work that's taken forward there, which was really, really good. The suicide prevention stuff, again, this is what has been taken forward at a council level, very much feeding into Health and Social Care Partnership. It's having a massive impact, and I think we'll have heard that many times across council services. There's a suicide action plan update report due to go to governance and scrutiny in the coming weeks, which again will just focus on some of the really good work that's been taken forward there. Such an important area for us, and we recognise that suicide prevention in relation to that here to listen work and all the other stuff we're doing as well, this won't go away anytime soon, and it's really, really important that we don't lose focus on that. Participatory budgeting was really well received. We've done it a few times now in relation to health and social care. We did it last year. It was really well received. We've taken some learning from it, feeding that back into the process. And we've now identified funding within the budget to allow that to take place on an annual basis or a recurring basis. So that will happen again as we move forward over the summer and into autumn. Keep the promise. Again, members will be aware of the promise in relation to our looked after children. There's a lot of work going on around about corporate parenting. I was fortunate enough to be able to attend the corporate parenting conference in Cumnock a couple of weeks ago, which was just brilliant to hear some of the stories and the work that's getting taken forward there. And I know Deputy Provost has a particular interest in that one as well. So that was a brilliant day. The protecting people part up top left, just to touch on that before I move on, in relation to this is the part round about keeping people safe across our community. So through the Chief Officer Group, the EDI chairs, all of our various protection work feeds in there. So around about Adult Protection Committee, the Child Protection Committee, MAPA, Violence Against Women, the Alcohol Drugs Partnership and MARAC, and we get regular updates fed into that Chief Officer Group. So while the Chief Officer Group is multi-agency and it sits there, a lot of the detailed work sits within the partnership teams and they take that forward on very much on a daily basis, and it is very much about, as I say, keeping people in our community, the most vulnerable people in our communities, safe at all times. Final point here, just in relation to the big bit in the middle about multidisciplinary teams. This has always been the way we want to work. This is about integration and action, actually bringing people together and working across disciplines. It's very much been taken forward. Eric's ran a whole series of workshops over the last number of months. Hundreds of people attended them from a whole range of different agencies and partners. And this is something that we're absolutely keen that we very much roll out. So the additional funding we got from the Scottish Government in relation to systems pressures, how we invest that to continue to have a really good high functioning system is very much about multidisciplinary themes. It's about bringing together health colleagues and council colleagues, but across a whole range of different professional remits and responsibilities, and allowing that to be as person centred as it has to be to get the right outcomes for every individual. I think when the last time we reviewed the strategic plan, the three big words that kept emerging was around about people, compassion and partnership. That's what drives us. It's what we're all about. It almost kind of underpins the values and what we are as a health and social care partnership and as an IJB. That very much remains the case within the strategic plan. There's been huge progress made around about participation and engagement. The local conversation was almost just the kind of the pinnacle of that, but there's been an awful lot of work done about this over the last number of years, and it's good to see it all coming to fruition. The lived and living experience has been really important to us as well. We absolutely need to hear the stories of people who are experiencing our services, or who have experienced services, to learn from that, to understand how it's worked for them, what we need to do differently going forward. One very small example of that is peer workers. We've used peer workers across a range of different areas now to work with people who are in similar circumstances to where they've been previously, and that's been a huge success. I think people engage much better with folk who've had that lived or living experience round about those same circumstances, and it's been really, really important for us. Collaborative leadership across the whole system. Again, I don't think we can underestimate what that looks and feels like. And that includes our third and independent sectors as well. So this isn't just about NHS and council, this is about recognising that the third and independent sector have a huge part to play in all of this as well. And they deliver an awful lot of really important services for us. I think our successes wouldn't be anywhere close to where they are at this point in time without our third sector. Final point in there, I think I confirmed that right at the start, is in relation to all of that feedback and engagement we've had, is that no replacement plan or significant amendments were required, and that was what was presented to the IJB previously, just to make sure that we were in a good place taking that forward. Some of the sub-plans, just to touch on briefly in relation to the property and asset management plan that went at the same time and as part of the packet papers for today. A few highlights in there in relation to Doon Valley Community Village. So this is the capital work that's getting taken forward up in Dunmellington. That's due to be completed and handover by summer 2025. A really exciting, innovative, different way of working. Clearly, given the number of stakeholders involved in it, it has been challenging to get all those people to agree what that might look like going forward, but we're heading into a really good place there. And as I say, that will present some real opportunities, not just within health and social care, this will be across the whole public sector in terms of what we can deliver within that particular community. Similar work across Kilmarnock Town Centre and also in Stewarton to understand what's in that and the possible in these communities as well. They're not as far developed, but we're starting to really get our thinking around about that and understand what that might start to provide in terms of opportunity. The constraining factor just now, just to be honest round about it all in terms of the funding allocations, is the NHS capital allocations and funding round about that is extremely challenging at this point in time. So any opportunities to develop into the future that would require NHS capital investment will present significant challenges. However, that shouldn't stop us being ambitious and actually pushing it forward, making the case and throwing our hat into the ring amongst those other projects that will also be in there for prioritisation. We all recognise that taking those services into our communities is the most important thing to do for caring for East Ayrshire, and that's definitely what we will continue to push for. Derwent Valley Pathfinder, this was about digital health and care, a funded project through the Scottish Government Pathfinder programme. It finished number of months, I can't remember exactly, but a number of months ago now, they had a closing presentation round about that. There was a number of actions that were agreed at the end of the Pathfinder that are now turning into reality, and those have been implemented, and then it's about scaling that up and actually taking it into other areas as well. So again, some really exciting opportunities. This is very much about using technology to support people at home. It reduces our costs because you don't need to provide as much care into those environments, but it also provides people a huge amount of flexibility and opportunities to live their lives in a very different way. The Cumnock Health and Wellbeing Centre is essentially the community hospital in Cumnock, and now that it's in the ownership of NHS, Ayrshire and Arran, a lot of work's been taken forward there. We've currently got the hospice co-located within each, which is a really exciting opportunity. It's almost a real chance to rebadge and refocus what we do within the community hospital, and when they move back out into their new build facility, hopefully next year, then there's a real chance for us to take the community hospital in Cumnock onto a new level and actually deliver services in a really different way within that community as well. As I mentioned at the start, within the Stewarton community. Again, just recognising the growth of the community there, the size of the community, the services that are currently available, but also the growth of how we deliver GP practice services now. Multidisciplinary teams, I've mentioned a few times, so they have mental health practitioners, they've got MSK professionals, they've got pharmacotherapists, they've got community treatment and care nurses, all part of that wider GP community. Clearly that puts pressure on the accommodation there, so there's a short to medium term option to increase the capacity within the Stewarton medical practice, which will provide a real opportunity to develop and deliver those services in a different way. But again, it's just recognising beyond that, what do we need to do within these communities to really embed health and social care in a different way. In relation to the workforce plan, I know we say this often, and sometimes people, it's a kind of throwaway comment, but our workforce are absolutely our greatest asset, and I think that's particularly true. We've seen that during the pandemic, and particularly in the last number of months when our health and social care services have been under massive pressure. Our staff have stepped up continually and done some brilliant work in there. So a lot of that's detailed within the workforce plan, but just again picking out a few highlights in there. There's a workforce planning board within the partnership's been established just to make sure we've got good governance around about it, the opportunity to identify things to take forward and how folk can feed into that process and very much take things forward. So rather than talking about it, this is about action-driven boards rather than just talking shops. Part of that, we've identified challenges around about recruitment into social work posts. That's been the case for probably a couple of years now. So allow us to address that in a different way. We've introduced a social work trainee programme, so it's about grow your own. So rather than trying to recruit all the time, it's actually about actually growing our own. So we've done this across a whole range of different areas. I'm just sort of highlighting the social work one because it's an area of good practice. So last year we identified 6 staff already employed within the partnership to undertake the postgrad diploma in social work to allow them to become social workers. Just in the last few weeks, there's a further 7 in terms of year 2 of the programme now been identified to take that forward as well. That also includes some undergraduate opportunities to really start to grow our own workforce in there, and that's, I think, is going to be a real success story for us going forward. Taking that to the next stage as well, so as well as social workers, it's almost that social care pathway as well, about trying to get people as they come out of school and college to recognise that social care is a really good, strong career pathway for them, building a framework around about that and then encouraging people to come and work with us. The No Wrong Path is clearly a part of that scope in there as well, and then very much about identifying, supporting people to work through the pathways within health and social care. Alongside that, we have a learning development strategy and also the Social Care Learning Hub, which was introduced as part of the Best Value Review into care at home services. Again, that Social Care Learning Hub was nominated for an IESE award a few months ago, and it won a silver award for the innovation and the work we're taking forward there. This is very much about recruitment, but it's also a huge part about retention. There's a big turnover in staff just now because it's a really, really competitive market. So once we get good staff, we need to be able to keep them. And we're thinking the Social Care Learning Hub is a way to actually invest in our staff, make sure they recognise those opportunities are there, and hopefully keep them and very much grow those career pathways for people. Mentioned before, we had one of our local conversations was about, and come up was really well attended by young people. Marion got a really hard question that day. So this is about people working in care. And the question she got asked by a wee girl, must have been 11 or 12-year-old, was, how do you teach people how to care? And as well as when everybody just starts that dumbfounded, you're thinking, whoa, that's a good question. But she was here and we answered it and she didn't like the answer, so she came back again. No, that's not what I'm asking. I'm asking, how do you make sure that we can teach people to care for others? And it's about kindness and justice and all those kinds of things. But it was fascinating that that type of challenge coming from a wee girl, 11-year-old. So it was brilliant to hear that. And that's the type of conversation that we need to take into our schools and into our communities if we're serious about growing social care as a career. We need to start to have those conversations differently. Again, members will be aware of this because this came through council last year in terms of the jobs and training fund. So we have taken full advantage of that in relation to both modern apprenticeships and graduate interns, about getting people into the organisation, recognising the opportunities in there, and then, as I say, hopefully keeping them once we do get them into the organisation. For our care experience young people, back to the promise and our corporate parenting duties and roles in there, we are through the job coaches supporting 15 care experience young people into modern apprenticeships. Those modern apprenticeships aren't within the partnership. Some of them might be, but this is about a much broader level. That's just to support those young people into the world of work and doing what we can to make sure that that can be successful. Ongoing engagement with staff is really, really important. So NHS have an approach called iMatters. They do it on an annual basis. We make sure that we use that iMatters survey, but we use it for all our staff, not just our NHS staff. This operates right across the partnership. It's just kicked off again. So it operates as a survey. People get the chance to feed in their comments and their anything that they're concerned about, anything they want to celebrate. It's done anonymously, it's done at a team level, and it's aggregated up into all different sets as well. Last year was really interesting. We had a really good, strong action plan in the back of it. We'll revisit it again, as I say, over the coming weeks and months to see what progress, if any, has been made over the last year, and make sure we can continue to support our staff to do the things that they want to do and that they need to do their job and to their best possible ability. Communication strategy also sits alongside all these other documents. This is about getting the messages out there, making sure that we're really strong in terms of how we engage with our stakeholders and the broader public as well. So we've put in place a campaign calendar that will run across days and months, just about making sure we can focus on some. This will be national events in relation to awareness weeks or awareness days, so we want to make sure we feed into them. We have a monthly Health and Social Care Partnership newsletter to share good news stories, share successes, make sure that people are aware of what's happening around about them. Again, I think that's really important, just that people don't get really focused on what's in front of them. They can see the bigger picture. We launched the Health and Social Care Partnership Living Well website over a year ago now. That's starting to build up in terms of what's on there. Mentioned before about some people were being quite critical to us at the events about how do we know what's available in the local community. All of that sits on our website and it always has done. The fact that people are asking the question, how do we know what's there, would suggest that that's not well enough communicated. So we're trying to get that message out more widely as well and use it to its best potential. We do use social media, but use it carefully, because sometimes the stuff you get back through social media is not helpful and you end up just fighting a battle all the time. So we need to be really careful around about how we do use social media, but it can be a really powerful way of getting a message out quickly and to lots of people, so that there is definitely scope round about that. The key thing round about this is just the ongoing consistency round about engagement with our partners, getting messages out there and making sure that people are communicating back to us, be engaged in that as well. That concludes the presentation I wanted to talk about. There are a number of recommendations within the covering report highlighted here, essentially to endorse the findings from the annual review of each of the plans that we've covered today. So strategic plan, workforce plan, comm strategy and the property and asset management strategy. To endorse again, as the IJB did, the 6 strategic commissioning intentions and a longer term approach set out within the plan. Note the report's already been approved by the IJB, so it's coming today for hopefully for your endorsement, although it's already been approved. To note that the reports, and probably not quite as detailed a presentation, will also go to the NHS board next week from each of the 3 IJB areas, because it's important that our NHS board colleagues are engaged in this as well. And finally, just in terms of the technicalities around about it, to note that directions would be issued by the IJB to both the council and the NHS board in line with the strategic plan in terms of the services that we wish to commission from the partner bodies. Conscious there's probably loads that I haven't touched on, Provost, but hopefully that gives a bit of a flavour of some of the stuff that's going on, and happy to take any questions. Normally to have the team around me to take questions as well, but probably didn't do that today. But if there's anything really hard, I'm going to look to Marion to answer it, if that's okay. But happy to take questions from anybody.
No, thanks very much, Craig. Really brilliant report. A lot of information in there that we've all evidenced. And well done to you and the team, and please keep that going. Leader.
That's a great presentation there from Craig. Maybe just the strategic plan is really clear and very readable, and it just puts where the issues that we need to address, what we've been good at, and the challenges that we've got, particularly in East Ayrshire. For me, there's maybe three real areas that I think we really need to concentrate, but specifically for East Ayrshire. One is we're growing older population, which is made clear in page 21. As the profile's is changing, and that makes some of our ambitions are keeping people in their own home, and which have been very successful, even more challenging as we progress, but it's continually the right thing to do. And it's good to see supported living accommodation come out the ground in Mauchline, but we need to do more to add to that. These have been tremendously successful, and you can see there in the stats and page 22 that we've been even managed to increase the number of people. And yesterday a number of us were up at Wicks Road to see one of the latest bungalow houses that have been made available mainly for elderly, and just to see how transformational that has been to these people's lives. The story we got for the gentleman that we met yesterday was his wife's in care, and this house not only he's come from a 3-bedroom house to a 2-bedroom house, much more manageable, on a bus route. His wife's in a care home. He was able to get to see her more frequently. So these are great, just individual stories, but they're great to hear. And with that, in terms of our delayed discharges, that's as we're always been held up, has been really good for that, and rightly so. But that doesn't mean there's challenge. Still got challenges there. Maybe at the meeting that we've got later on with other Ayrshires, that position is that we continue to deliver more or less zero delayed discharges. That's not a consistent case with our neighbours, and we won't want to say too much about that. That's going to have an impact in our services elsewhere. So we've got to make sure that other local authorities are delivering, and where we can support them in that process, I think we need to give that some focus. The other main area for worry and concern is, when you see their alcohol-related deaths are fairly consistent with Scotland, but drug-related hospital admissions are significantly above, which makes our efforts we're doing in dealing with recovery, mental health, all the more worthwhile. And I think there's challenges nationally with budgets for the ADP, and that's something we must really focus on to make sure that projects like the Recovery Hub, which is going really well, Jude Finney Street, and some of the other drug related projects are and dealing with people in recovery. We need to focus considerable more attention as well. And in terms of the wider issues of mental health, I think in terms of how we measure that, it's absolutely alarming that 25,000 people in East Ayrshire are in prescribed drugs for psychosis, anxiety and depression, and that belies, but it's probably a bigger figure. The way, as we're learning more and more, the way to treat this is treat some of the causes of this, and our community connectors are doing a good job with that. We really need to keep that up. Sometimes it's issues, it's socialisation, it can be debt, it can be other things that are weighing in people's minds. Much more effective and long-term outcomes if we're dealing with the root causes of some of these issues. And we've been really working well, but we need to really keep that focus up. And we maybe need to look at how we maybe measure that in the future. I'm pleased to see also, another worrying trend in terms of suicide, and I know we're doing a lot of work in terms of suicide prevention. I'm really pleased that governance and scrutiny are going to be looking at that, and we'll be waiting with interest to see the outcome of that. And just finally, Craig, you mentioned, the workforce, the care workers. When you see some of the it's coming out now in documentaries, some of the challenges right up and down the UK people have had, the work our care workers have put in, you know, and expose them to risk, to personal risk, to keep that service going has been absolutely amazing, and really be proud to be part of an organisation that's delivering that care. And I think our decision to concentrate and delivering that care in people's own homes rather than care homes has absolutely been vindicated. But I think we really need to let these people know how much we really appreciate their work. But I'll just leave it with these 3 key areas, and thanks very much, Provost. Thank you, Craig.
No, thanks, Craig. Yep.
So I don't think there's many questions in there, Leader, but just maybe a couple of comments. So the first point you made about the number of people growing older, so we do recognise that in relation to the demographics. I suppose the bit that we need to be really cognisant of as well, so while we've got a number of people growing older, is the balance between our ageing population and the working age population is going to significantly change, because while the older ages are going to increase, I think what we're recognising is the younger population will decrease at the same time, so the proportion of older people is going to be significantly higher as we move forward as well. So that's a point we need to not lose sight of as well. But those demographic challenges are real, we know they're real, and the pressure that will put in our budgets are incredibly real as well. So I think people growing older is a good thing. We talk about life expectancy is good. We also talk about healthy life expectancy, and what we're seeing just now is that healthy life expectancy is not increasing. So people are living older, but they're not living healthy lives as they're getting older. That needs to be a priority for us as well. That's one of the things we need to look at, is how can we support and make sure that people live longer, yes, but live healthy lives as we go forward as well. A number of challenges just in our local areas around about COPD, round about congenital heart disease, for example. So there's a number of issues in there that we need to just be really cognisant of. There's some early intervention work that will take a long time to work through, but it's the right thing to do. There's a pilot which we agreed through the IJB round about, get this right, non-fatty liver disease. Again, this is about people who are perhaps overweight. It's about folk who are perhaps going to be diabetic in the coming years, but it's very much early intervention around about that. So there's the use of an app that we're going to try and deploy for a very small amount of money that actually supports individuals to look after themselves. It's the self-care part of it that prevents a lot of these things happening into the future. So there's a lot of work we need to do around about the demographic, the time bomb. I think that has been probably described as that in many different places. And that will be a real challenge for us. The the delayed discharge DD, wrong DDs. The delayed discharge part, I deliberately didn't mention in the presentation because I know it's a particular focus in many different arenas. We do well in it. We have always done well and we continue to do well, but it's a challenge. It's a real challenge. Our delayed discharges typically just now around about adults with incapacity, so folk who need a particular legal process to take place before they can come out of hospital. That's really challenging. It's really frustrating for us as well, because it has to go through a particular process and it takes a long time to get there. If you strip them out of it, our delayed discharge performance is absolutely brilliant. The average wait for somebody to get a care package to come out of hospital is 1, 2, 3 days, certainly less than 5 days on average. Every now and again you'll get a wee blip, and that's in a particular area where the care package, the ability to deliver care packages is challenged, but we've still never had MD breach 14 days, which is that national figure around about it. That's not the case in other areas, and I'm not going to talk about other areas because that's not our concern, but we do continue to engage in local, regional, national conversations around about what do we do, what do others do, how can we start to share intelligence. As I say, our AWI part's challenging for us, so we can maybe learn from others around about that, and we're keen that we do that, and we engage in those conversations all the time. Final point for me is I absolutely share your concerns around about mental health, drugs and alcohol, suicide, and sometimes those 3 areas are all intertwined. It can be the same person that's caught up in a lot of this stuff. So those challenges going forward are things that we are really focused on. There's been significant investment made in a number of those services, and that will continue to be the case. The bit about peer workers and how we actually approach this in a very different way is starting, I think, to have results, and we want to continue to see that going forward. Thanks, Chair.
Thanks very much, Craig. Deputy Provost.
Thanks, Provost. Thanks very much for the report, Craig. I've just got a question in regards to CAMS, Child and Adolescent Mental Health Services. I like to say sorry, but I'm no. Right, so obviously this ties into the national outcomes for children, 1 to 3, just making sure they've got the best start in life, being successful earners, confident, improving life chances. So the corporate parenting conference that you spoke about in Cumnock was really great. It had representatives for a whole range of health services, including that a health practitioner for CAMS who had the opportunity to attend a workshop that she presented in, who was very interesting. She spoke about it being such a small team in Ayrshire, about the long waiting list because the increase in demand for referrals, particularly, 60% increase in those waiting for ADHD diagnosis and assessments. Now, I know schools particularly do exhaust every opportunity before referring on to CAMHS. There's loads of good services there before it, like the school counselling service, for example, is great for young people for the talking therapies to get tools for sensory put in classes and coupled with educational psychologists and with the people who know them best in schools, that's enough for some young people. However, obviously significant mental health problems and brain conditions do need the referral to CAMHS for help. Now, things like obsessive compulsive disorder can present between the ages 10 and 12, but in teenage years and young adulthood. Most people diagnosed with ADHD are under the age of 12, but great to see that adults are now being diagnosed more, so that adults across Scotland and the world can think, why am I like this all my life? You get a neurodivergency. It's great to be on the other side of that. And even things like Tourette's syndrome between the ages of 2 and 15, where young people are presenting with tics. Now, we've seen Lewis Capaldi come out recently as well and spoke about his diagnosis publicly, which is great. And I know that means a lot to young people who suffer tics because we've heard that directly from young people themselves. So there's a load of things there that really do impact a young person's ability to learn, attain and have positive life chances. Now, in terms of the picture of CAMHS, could we talk about what the current picture looks like? In terms of the waiting list, it is lengthy. Is there anything been looked at to address the waiting times? Is there any alternative methods being looked at? Just obviously the waiting list is putting a lot of pressure on CAMHS, so we just need to make sure that a service that does a great job like CAMHS, who are under pressure, are continuing to deliver really high quality care, good diagnosis for young people. They're always considered, they're safe, effective care, which is testament to the good service that they are, but they're under a lot of pressure. So that. Also want to pay tribute to Nest, which is the Neurodevelopment Empower Strategy team in Ayrshire, which is funded by the IJB, the 3 Ayrshire IJBs. They go around doing workshops for neurodivergencies, autism and girls, etc. David particularly in that service, who's lived experience with his own condition, and it can see things through the eyes of that. And it's great to see them also at St Patrick's as well at their open day, and they're getting out and about in communities and trying to get the word out there of empowerment for young people with neurodivergency. So thank you for Ness for that. But I just thinking about CAMHS, can we talk a wee bit about what the picture looks like? Thanks.
Through you, Provost. So I think we all recognise there's been a number of challenges around about CAMHS for probably quite a while now. There's a national specific, so maybe the first point is that the CAMHS service is delivered on a pan-Ayrshire basis by North Ayrshire, so they deliver it on our behalf, although we absolutely contribute in terms of funding, and the IJB have to agree that the strategy and the direction of travel around about that. So there's a national specification for CAMHS, and the CAMHS team locally are now in a position to be able to deliver against that national specification. They do monitor their performance on a regular basis. It's reported monthly. I think November, December last year was probably the worst ever months in terms of achieving their standards. I think it was about 40% achievement. They've done some significant work around about why that was and how they could remedy it. They're now sitting at 97%, so there's been a huge improvement in the last number of months. How they sustain that is a really interesting question. So we brought a paper to the IJB probably the last meeting, a couple of months ago now, the last meeting at the IJB, to agree that we need to find a way to protect the CAMHS service. So CAMHS has been overwhelmed, as you described it, with a number of people being referred into CAMHS, but it's around about the neurodivergence part of it, which is then affecting their ability to actually deliver against the national specification for the core CAMHS work, so the individuals that do have those significant issues that you mentioned. So by focusing on the national specification, that allows them to absolutely get to the children who have the most severe needs in there. But then that means, what do we do with those round about the neurodivergent part of it? And that's a bit where we're concerned about the waiting lists. What are the alternatives in the meantime? What do you do to actually support those families whilst they're on the waiting list? So there's a lot of work going on just now to try and identify what that that starts to look and feel like. You mentioned Nest. I think there's an intention that we would scale up Nest to actually do more with Nest, because I think that's some of the alternatives, is that we use Nest differently, we use them to do different things. So again, a pan-Ayrshire basis, we're looking at scope to do that. Again, that be done through North Ayrshire. So I think we would plan to bring a report to the next IJB, which is in a couple of weeks, round about what that starts to look and feel like in terms of scaling up that service. There are probably other things we need to look at as well, round about how do we, again, on a pan-Ayrshire basis, look to commission some of the diagnosis. So I know some people are going away and getting private diagnoses round about ADHD and others. That then presents a challenge. If you get a private diagnosis, the GP might not accept that for then doing the treatment plans. That's hard. So I think we're looking at how can we commission, so it wouldn't be a private diagnosis, it would actually be us through the NHS commissioning some private providers to help with that, just to try and tackle that, some of the waiting list in there and the waiting times round about it. So that work's ongoing as well. So long story short, I think the focus needs to be on letting CAMHS do what CAMHS do well, and also having an alternative round about the neurodivergent part of it. This happens, and so CAMHS is very much about children and adolescent services. We're starting to see an increase in, so our community mental health teams are under pressure as well, and a lot of that's about the adult ADHD type stuff as well. I think we're seeing and we're hearing, particularly in social media, and some of the celebrities who are like Lewis Capaldi that you mentioned, who have some of these conditions and are now starting to talk openly about it. Others are saying, I might be like that as well. I'm going to try and get the diagnosis. That's putting huge pressure on our adult services as well. So that part round about Nest, we're having a similar conversation to see, can you actually use Nest to do this across the whole community, and tackle some of those bigger issues as well. So we're looking at it in a really holistic, don't like the word, way, but we are looking at it across the whole sort of age range as well, and hopefully over the summer we'll start to see some real opportunities emerging round about different ways of working here, because it's not good enough, I have to say. Yeah.
Aye, Craig, thanks very much for that. And I were talking about the neurodivergency type of thing, but we can't forget how deeply impacting things like living with ADHD is, particularly for young people and adults. And I'm really, really chuffed to see adults having the increase of getting diagnosed, and it's like really sad that the pressure is there. But I think it's a severely underdiagnosed and undertreated brain condition that can impact people's lives. So great to see that, and thanks very much. That's really interesting about the Nest and expanding. So look forward to seeing that. Let's go.
There's a wee queue, folks, but we'll get there. Councillor McMahon.
Thanks, Provost. Again, Craig, thanks for that presentation. I think the leaders covered a lot of the stuff I was going to say. I'm not going to gather everything again, but I think it's important again to pick up on the delayed discharges, and down to the leadership in East Ayrshire that's led us that way. That clear link into our housing, our assisted needs housing, I think has played a major impact for that care at home service every day. The Andrew Nisbet Place, Quarry Now, Witch Road, and no forgetting Morphin, and the type of housing that we need. As the spokesperson for older people, I was at a gathering last week, and again, housing played a major part of that, and that clear link to health and social care and housing, being able to provide the right house to provide that service at home. I met somebody yesterday, sadly, that I'll pick up later on, and again, it's meeting that type of house to provide that care in. You touched on the significant risk around about the recovery hub. I think that 5-year plan that we have for that already, that funding that's coming in there is part of that recovery, and the recovery hub. We're talking to the lead on that, and seeing the significant impact that's having as far as recovery goes is really good and encouraging. It's something we need to pick up on to make sure that funding's secure. And likewise, the funding, the Equally Safe funding again for the Violence Against Women partnership in East Ayrshire, and working with other partners in there, is we really need to secure that, and it's really encouraging. Finally, for me, I think it's round about. If I could pick up on the community hospital in Cumnock, and I knew that we're finally rid of the PPI deal there, and it's back in the hands of NHS, and that kind of free role that they have. We've seen that welcoming the hospice temporarily in there, but it's what type of service. I suppose the question could be, are we going to focus on some sort of specialised service for the community hospital there, whether that be respiratory or even dental services? I think that's all I've got to say, rather than just pick up finally that link. And again, thanks to the health and social care team that work along with us closely around about the suicide prevention and well-being stuff. We're remiss of me not to mention that in it.
Yep, thanks, Provost, and thanks, Councillor McMahon. So I think the supported accommodation, the housing models have been really successful for us. I think what we need to make sure as we go forward is, so I think the success of that is we've identified the people who take up those tenancies, so we know that as we're building, there's almost the right people are moving in there. So we've invested a bit of time and effort, and there's a person, an individual actually responsible for doing that matching process before we see the houses getting built. I think what we've seen is that those with the most significant levels of need have probably been matched into tenancies. So going forward about the future models, it's then about identifying what is the future need going forward. So it might not be the same model, in fact undoubtedly it won't be the same model, but I think there's still some model in there around about supporting models of care. So I think Blair and I need to have a conversation round about what that looks like into the future and how we can make sure that the funding round about it can work sustainably, because I think it's something that we absolutely recognise the success of it. I think when others ask us how and why can you have such a good performance in terms of delayed transfers of care, delayed discharges, and not use care homes to the same extent as other people, the answer to that is because of the supported accommodation models, and there's lots of stuff in there, but that is a big part of it, and we do need to build on that going forward. I think the bit about the recovery hub is really interesting as well. So the recovery hub's not ours, so that I'd be really clear to say that the Health and Social Care Partnership do not run or operate or own the recovery hub. That's done by the recovery network, of which we're a part, and we feed into that. So it's kudos to them for what they've managed to achieve in there. That's absolutely the case, and we'll want to continue to support that and make sure through the EDP that the funding models work and they can do that, and again on a sustainable basis into the future. Probably the key thing for me and your points or your questions is around about the community hospital. So yes, there's a plan for the future. So once the hospice move out, it is very much about reinventing that as a almost a centre of excellence, but not around about dental or respiratory or any particular illness. It's very much about community rehab. It's about step up, step down. So it's the subacute care. It's about palliative care, not at a hospice level, but again, just supporting people who are maybe not wanting to be at home, but an acute hospital is not the right place for them either. So there's a number of models in there that we're currently working with. There's only 24 beds in the main ward at Burnock just now in each. So when we actually get those other wards back and we can use them differently, it's trying to scale up some of that stuff. So there is a plan emerging, a very strong plan emerging around about the future models of care at each. Very much around about a nurse-led model as well, so it changes the dynamic of how those services are delivered. A lot of work going on over the last wee while around about recruitment into advanced nurse practitioners, senior advanced nurse practitioner and nurse consultant roles in there to start to really develop and take that model of care forward. So happy to share that as it starts to evolve. It'll certainly come through the IJB, but we can make sure that information is shared, certainly with local members, in terms of the impact it will have around about the local area, the surrounding areas as well. But a really exciting opportunity in the community hospital there. And the feedback we get from anybody who goes there, whether that be from the medical team, the nursing team or visitors, is that it's such a brilliant place to go to. People genuinely love going to each. It's just one of those wee places that I think when you compare it against an acute hospital, it's very, very different, and people really do value the input that they're making. So thank you for that.
Thank you very much. Councillor Linton.
Thanks, Provost. Just more a comment than a question, Craig. I'd like to touch on your presentation, particularly around about employment opportunities and upskilling. I think the unanimous decision of the previous council to set aside core funding for jobs and training has proved to be the correct decision. When you see the rollout, and I was particularly touched by the fact we took 15 care experienced young people into apprenticeships. I think that's quite a remarkable achievement. And it's rolling out beyond the core of East Ayrshire. You're saying you're taking advantage of the funding. I think that's what it's there for. It's absolutely brilliant to see the opportunities, and also the upskilling the 6 social workers, grow our own staff. That's very much what we were talking about when we set this up. So well done.
Again, through you, Chair. So thank you for that, Councillor Linton. So just to be clear, in terms of the money, it's the council money, and we are taking full advantage of it. But we've also set money aside within our own reserves about this as well. So to develop this, to grow your own social work programme, similar things around about AHPs, nurse as well. So we're doing lots of work in there, but also things like the graduate intern. So rather than funding it for a year, we're keen that we fund it for 2 years. So it's putting in the extra money on top of it as well. So it's not just saying somebody else is doing it. Can we have some money, please? It's very much about identifying our own money in there too, to bolster and support and get the absolute best out of it. So I think it's a huge opportunity that we just need to grab and run with. So we're trying to do that. Thanks.
Well, that's great. When I was talking to Frank Sweeney one day up at Shortleys, for folk that don't know, he's a executive director of Cunningham Housing, and he cited Health and Social Care Partnership and East Ayrshire Council for housing asset services. And Cunningham decided to bring all of their maintenance operations in-house. So definitely the good work that you're doing in our housing asset services is being noticed. Thanks. Councillor Richardson.
Thanks, Provost. It's just a question for Craig. Thanks very much for that presentation, Craig. I thought it was really, really good. Just a specific question about the recruitment and more the retention of the care at home staff. First of all, I think you know that I think I sent you an email at some point during the last year just to thank the staff that helped somebody very, very close to me with a care package when they came out of hospital. It was absolutely brilliant. In fact, the nursing staff in the hospital, well, it was my mum, told my mum that had she been from any other area of Ayrshire, she might have had quite a lengthy stay in hospital, but because she was from East Ayrshire, she was able to come out almost straight away after a pretty serious operation, and the care she received at home. And I met a couple of the ladies also when I was round visiting, etc. It was just superb. So thanks to you and your team for that. But let's get to the specific question. It's good. I mean, I've asked questions of officers in the past, and it's good that we've filled some of the vacancies we had, and I know we've been quite successful in the recruitment side. But you yourself mentioned the fact that it's a very, very competitive market for skilled people in this area, and that turnover's quite high. But you then said that you're going to start focusing on that. And I wondered what are the specific things that East Ayrshire can do when we get good people in, Craig? What are we going to do to try and keep them so that they then don't move on?
Through you, Chair. So there's a range of things in there. An awful lot of them are things that happen at a council level already. So through Amanda and her team round about some of the employee benefits that we have, a pension scheme thing, that's actually really attractive. That's a huge offer to people just now, particularly in the current financial environment, and the life assurance and all the bits that sit alongside being in a pension fund. So some of those parts that they're not specific to us, absolutely. So to encourage somebody to come and work for or be employed by the council, those sort of broader offers make it really, really attractive. Some of the bits we've developed in the last number of years, again in partnership both with council and NHS, is round about the wellbeing offer to staff as well. So some of those OC health, the counselling type supports, bereavement supports, the suicide awareness stuff, all of that broader wellbeing stuff, there's a real attraction in that as well. So you don't get that in other places. I suppose the bit round about the social care learning hub that I mentioned, that's where we start to want to be a bit different. So it's how do you invest? Sometimes it's dead easy when you need to make a saving. The first thing to go is learning development and all those types of opportunities. And we've probably done that over the years. So this is about trying to put some of that back in again, to invest in our staff to make sure that we can give them the right training programmes in-house or external, whatever it needs to be. And pretty much, I suppose the key in there is about having those pathways. So somebody may come into a relatively junior job, but be able to say, well, if you do this and if you do well, and here's the opportunity to learn and to progress, and actually defining those pathways. So it's not about you come in and do a job and you were doing this job in 20 years' time. It's actually looking and saying, well, if you want, there's a pathway in there and we'll support you to do that. So we work really closely with a range of different partners. Also, the Learning Hub does the work themselves, but work closely with the college, with schools, etc. as well, just to try and encourage and support people to come and work for us. The bit about turnover is a challenge. It is a competitive market, particularly for a professional, paraprofessional staff, where we would typically be quite an attractive proposition for people who stay, particularly south side of Glasgow, Renfrewshire, Lanarkshire. Working in Ayrshire is not that big a deal. Cost of living crisis, cost of fuel a number of months ago, that presents a significant challenge in terms of if you can get a job really close to home, compared to driving for half an hour, whatever that might cost on a weekly basis to come to East Ayrshire. We're starting to see that. So typically we would attract lots of good people from the central belt and they would stay here, and that's good. I think over the last few while what we're seeing is that's becoming more challenging for us. There's no easy answer to that other than making it a really attractive place for people. The best way of us dealing with it is actually to grow your own. So we've got really good local people in and keep them here. Feeds in really well to community wealth building, part of the Ayrshire growth deal as well, about keeping the money in our local communities. But for our care staff, care at home staff, don't know the exact numbers, but certainly way in excess of 90% of our care at home staff live and work in the local community. So those individuals don't travel long distances. They are very much at the heart of their community, and that's why they operate so well. We don't have a huge reliance on the external market, so it is about our own staff working in there. We're now over 90% of our care at home is delivered internally, with the balance picked up in the market. So that's a real strength for us in terms of resilience and flexibility. But it's also about making sure that we can make it an attractive offer to people. In terms of pay, it is attractive when you compare it to private sector. It's not attractive when you compare it to jobs in retail, for example. So as you head towards Christmas and all, Argos and all these places are desperate to get people into work. They can offer an awful lot more money than we can offer. So it's trying to think out the box of what makes it an attractive proposition to be here. And to be really, really honest about it. The people who we've got working in those care jobs, they do it because they care. I don't think a lot of them do it for the money, but we need to make sure that we're not taking advantage and the money is appropriate for what they're getting paid. And as I say, we know that we're paying certainly better than a range of other areas, but it's just keeping that as a really attractive option for folk. That helps.
Thanks, David. No, it's really important. I try and remind folk kindly that it's not a care industry, it's a care profession. And I think that's what we should be calling it. Councillor Canning.
Thanks, Provost. And thanks, Craig, as well for that presentation. And always interesting to hear what an outline of your plans for around stewarding. A couple of questions. First question is if you could just give us an outline of what your policy is around vapes, health policy for young people specifically. And I mean, obviously there's a number of aspects to vapes, and one that's quite topical, obviously, is disposable disposable vapes. You've got underage selling, the black market. I know hopefully maybe deal with some of those in upcoming council meetings, but they are related. If you've got underage vapes, it's young people. Underage selling, it's young people that are getting access to them. And with all these flavours and stuff, they're interested in doing it. Disposable vapes makes it cheaper, so young people again are getting access to disposable vapes. Black market, we don't know what's in a lot of these vapes, so again that's for young people. So around young people, what's the policy? And then the second question is, although these are other discrete issues, is there a linked up policy to make sure that we're tackling this holistically? So that's the kind of second question. Thanks.
Very much, I'll take that question. Obviously, we know it's very topical actually this morning. I think Ash published a report just on vaping in children today. So we know that it's on the increase. So vaping's on the increase, but smoking is on the decrease. We also know that vaping is harmful, but less harmful than smoking tobacco. So it's a real challenge. And just the points that you highlighted there, the manufacturers are making this really attractive to children. So there's an element of probably policy to be made nationally around how that's tackled and challenged, given the harms that we are now seeing. And obviously we're seeing it in the increase because it's relatively new. It's been around for about 10 years. So within that context, the approach that's been taken locally is led through NHS Ayrshire and Arran. They're working in collaboration with the 3 local authority areas. Education is crucial to this, so educating children and young people at the earliest possible point is really important. So that's one of the areas of intervention. So taking it into classrooms and supporting children to understand the difficulties and challenges and the harms that e-cigarettes and tobacco more generally present to them. This is something that's done in schools anyway, particularly focused around smoking. But now with this added dimension of e-cigarettes, that's now part of the work that's being taken forward in relation to that. We also have, from a health and social partnership perspective, we have school nurses and health visitors and health promotion staff, and the work that they take focuses in on e-cigarettes and smoking as well. So the key around this is education, but there is a challenge around managing that from a local perspective, and I suppose making it much less attractive to children. So there is a focus on it. It is being taken forward. We recognise it's a growing challenge and a growing area of concern for children. Hope that helps to answer that point. Thanks.
Just on top of that as well, I was invited along to the public health. They had a development day a number of months ago, talking about their priorities for the years ahead and how they're going to focus on it. So there's lots of discussion about a whole range of different things. But one of those areas they wanted to talk about, which is dead interesting, just to be almost a kind of bystander and hearing what we're talking about, was their sort of smoking prevention work. And they're focusing on, it used to all be about tobacco and the damage of tobacco and nicotine, tar and all these other things as well. But they were really, really clear that smoking prevention work had to include vapes as well, because they're concerned about the longer standing public health issues around about it. So as in terms of that bigger holistic approach to it, they're really, really keen that they do make sure that vapes and those other types of the nicotine products, irrespective of whether it's a cigarette or anything else, is a big part of their agenda going forward. So that focus is going to remain in there at that holistic level.
Yeah, just I suppose that's the challenge, isn't it? I mean, these are good for adults to stop smoking, but they're awful for kids, you know. And I suppose that's the challenge. But I just also wanted to pay credit to Trading Standards. You know, I think that in Sturton they've been doing some really good work with the police to try and stop underage selling, but it is a challenge. So yeah, but it was also around that kind of linked up what we're doing with Trading Standards, with the police, with you know, the different aspects of this waste management stuff like that to bring it all together to challenge it. Thanks.
No, thank you. Yeah, if it's used as a tool in a proper context where clinicians will prescribe vapes in place of something that's on 60 a day, it can be a beneficial. But absolutely accept. I mean, I've been riding around John Finnis Street in a bike, and you come up behind a Fazbar, it's like a scene out of Cheech and Chong movie. And if you know who Cheech and Chong were, you're showing your age. But it really is. It's a big impact, and we really need to get a handle on it. Thanks for that, Councillor John McGee.
Thanks, Provost. Thanks for that presentation, Craig. Again, there's always good work going on in the IJB despite the challenges we face. But I just want to make 2 or 3 comments, but I will eventually get to a question, I hope. Just at the start, Ken, you were talking about the financial challenges you face. And again, you're talking about the reality of the challenges that you're facing. But I stay in the United Kingdom, and it seems to be a country where we can make it rain money. 37 billion for the test and trace, for example, $1 billion tax giveaway for the latest Chancellor. So when folk are talking about financial challenges, sometimes it doesn't seem real because it's raining money in other places. And then we talk about how housing, education, economics assisted for longer, we're living longer. And it's always amazed me, Ken, we're living longer. So in 100 years, our life expectancies are improved. But now we're expected to work longer. Ken, that shouldn't be our reward. But we're no, the guy in Alton Hill or Happy Old Road, isn't he living longer, healthier? He's not even living as long as the guy in Dundonald Road. And these are the problems that we face. That's the reality of our situation. And one of the greatest, I'm old enough to remember going to my bed and the ice is inside of the windows and you could see your own breath. So central heating was one of the key things that helped us live longer. But now we can't afford to turn our central heating on. So we're building nice houses, but now we're creating warm spaces. And we heard Fianna Friel yesterday about our warm spaces. And then she happened to talk about libraries. And I think that's bringing me to my question that over the years in the council, and again, this isn't specific to the IJB, but we talk about partnership working. We've shut libraries over the years, but we talk about well-being, health and well-being. And then we talk about swimming pools like the Galleon, how we've got to keep subsidising that, Visions and Cumnor, and how we subsidise it, how it doesn't make money. But should it be making money? Because we don't seem to account for the well-being that we get for these swimming pools or the well-being that we get for the libraries. I don't know how you would actually quantify that. But should they places have to make money? Should they places like Galston had 3,000 or the 200 more footfalls than Comores Library had? So Comores is shut and these get staying open. Ken, there are a real benefit to the IJB and to the council and to the well-being of communities. So do we look at that in the round? Do we look at libraries? Do we look at swimming pools, etc., etc., through partnerships to say, hey, we're no subsidising that. They things are actually keeping folk fitter longer, but we don't see that benefit at the very, Ken, when you go in through the door, you don't see the benefit to 30 or 40 years later. I think that's my question, if that makes sense.
Yes, it makes sense if that's the question. I don't know that I can necessarily answer that. I think we'd all probably accept and recognise and realise that there are broader benefits to things like swimming pools, etc. Because if we're keen that people live longer, healthier lives, then we need to support and encourage and find a way to do that. There's a term used a number of years ago about social prescribing, where rather than giving people drugs or medication stuff, then you'd expect them to go to a gym or for a walk or something like that as well. We don't use that term very much anymore, but it's still a really big thing in terms of how do we start to change people's attitudes. The bit I mentioned before about using an app, that's Holly Health, it's called Holly Health app, about supporting people to live healthier so they don't become pre-diabetic, they don't start to get the liver disease, etc. All of that feeds in there as well. But part of that, when they're on the app, it will say, now go for a walk, now go to your local gym. Now, so that will be encouraging you to do the very things that you're talking about, Councillor McGee. So I think as a system, as a council, as a leadership round about this, there probably is, there is definitely an angle in there. How that sits in terms of who pays for what and the angles round about that's not something we've really broached much before. Maybe we do as we go forward. We need to start to consider these things. But if we are serious about early intervention and prevention, we need to look at every opportunity to do that. Having people stay fit doesn't necessarily mean they need to go for a swim or they need to pay money to go to a gym. It could be a walk in the country. It could be a walk down to the shops and back rather than taking the car. There's things in there that don't necessarily cost money as well. And it's looking at that overall, the whole picture in it, and seeing what we can do in there. But I absolutely take your point round about there's some of the big advantages, the things we've seen over the last 100 years, down probably the last 10 or 20 years, that is helping people, are some of the things that are being challenged round about financial decisions being taken across whole systems across the piece, that could be damaging, and we need to be really careful that we don't make decisions over here that have an adverse impact elsewhere. And I think the strength of our partnership means that we can have those conversations and we can make sure that those really adverse implications and consequences don't come to bear. But it will be a challenge going forward as each of those individual funding bodies or partners become under increasing financial pressure themselves. But that shouldn't stop us talking about it and finding the best way forward and understanding how we can do it in a really joined up way.
I think it's such an important point that you make, and I think, Craig's presenting on behalf of, the IJB and all the work today, but it's absolutely crucial that going forward in this chamber that we look at things through a wellbeing lens, every decision that we make. And Annika told us yesterday that she's going to undertake a really deep engagement with the communities to really understand needs and look at different solutions to taking things forward. And I know that the portfolio of services that I lead are absolutely sitting in beside that carefully to say, right, okay, what have we got in communities? What's been run by the community? Could we put extra things on there? What do the opening hours look like? And that ties absolutely back into wellbeing. So there's two things that is a really important engagement that Annika's doing, and it isn't just around response to cost of living. Cost of living is the current crisis and is likely to deepen. But actually, if we build a resilience by understanding the needs of communities and investing differently, it might not be the way we did it before. That's so important, and that work's been undertaken. And I think the other really important thing is about our work around economic growth. And the way that we are developing the economic growth now in the economy isn't the traditional way. It's about a fair wellbeing economy. So the work we're doing across Ayrshire and the new economic strategy isn't in a kind of silo. It's much more about helping people back into work that are really far from the workplace. Because the best thing we can do for people is to help them to get good work, because that helps them to make good decisions and have good play and good leisure. People having control over their own lives. And surely as public servants, our job is very much about letting people live the happiest, healthiest lives they can. It's a simple vision, nothing more than that. So I think the point's really, really well made. And I think it's important through our partnership forums, but maybe the work that Annika's leading, that comes back, and then we look to see how we could all add more value to that. When she hears deeply what the people we serve are telling us in terms of their leisure and wellbeing needs going forward, then we need to look at that through. It's not an East Ayrshire leisure problem, the same as people in recovery or in addictions isn't a health and social care problem. It's looking across the piece, same as antisocial behaviour. It doesn't sit with one portfolio, so sometimes gets lost. So in this chamber, it's important for us to consider what comes back from the people we serve and then how we all might contribute to that. So it's a really good one, and I think it's so important.
Okay, thank you. We've got the leader, then Councillor Filson, Jones and Richardson. Leader.
So I was basically just to respond to John. I mean, and Katie's answered that. The point's well made, and it's about establishing priorities. I mean, I sit in a health board, and it's like every other health board. several £1 million over budget in terms of prescribed drugs. We've got 25, you can fill Rugby Park two times over with the number of folk that are on antidepressants, and on that we need to really think about well-being and preventive measures and dealing with socialisation and getting people into work is so much better, and it's getting back to old-fashioned Keynesian economics for a lot of it, and just we need an absolute a kind of whole rethink. I never thought I'd get way back when I first started the council, we're shutting down all man's cabins, like they were going out of fashion, and they were going out of fashion. Now we're building men's sheds. Maybe aside for the half bottle of whiskey that always kept in the corner of the old man's cabin, I wouldn't approve of that, but there's certainly a need for for men, for well-being of men, and some of the things that we maybe were doing that we didn't realise that they were having positive outcomes. So I think we really need to really rethink again, and it's a point well made.
Thank you. Yeah, Councillor Filson.
Thanks, Provost. Thanks, Craig, for your report. You mentioned there the new facility is going to be at Millington in 2025. I certainly are looking forward to that as a community. But as you'll know yourself, Craig, there's a good practice happening in Millington just now with the NHS pilot for 2 years, bringing all the services to the local village itself rather than having to travel to Ayr Hospital or to Cross House. So that's been a great success. There is hope, I think, once all the data comes back after 2 years, that'll be rolled out into other rural areas in East Ayrshire. So I hope the new facility is ready, that these clinics will continue in the new facility, because it's a big saving for people having to travel away to the hospitals, and it's freeing up the hospitals as well. So it's good practice. Thank you.
Thanks for that, Councillor Filson. So just a comment. I think that's something we did recognise. When Councillor McMahon mentioned each earlier as well. I think we recognise if you're to count the number of people driving past each to get to another hospital, number of people leaving Dunmellington to go to Ayr Hospital, for example, how many of those services can be delivered in those local communities. And clearly we can't do it in every single community, but there are a few key communities where we do need to do things differently. And that's what Caring for East Ayrshire is all about. It's about actually identifying what can you do there, and then putting the infrastructure in place to deliver against it. The stuff you talk about that's happened in Dunmellington has been brilliant. So I know it was very much NHS led, but there's been a number of different areas to feed into as well. I know James McKee, for example, from Council Digital side fed in there as well, because there's been some support given around about access to devices so that people can do stuff remotely as well. So although it started off in one thing, it actually grew sort of tentacles and sort of spiraled into different areas really positively. So you're right. I think once we see the data, and some of the early data we are seeing already has been hugely successful, and if that can be scaled up into other areas, I think it does start to represent a model that we can take elsewhere, alongside the Tech Pathfinder stuff, which is one of my slides as well, which was that took place in the Irvine Valley. And again, it's some of those rural issues and how can you do things differently. So I think joining some of this stuff all together, there's a real different type of model starting to emerge that will be really successful.
I just mentioned too, that's into their second year now, and there's not been an appointment missed at all. So everybody's attended their appointments, which is really good as well.
Thanks. And who would have thought that a wristwatch can monitor your temperature and your heart rate and your blood pressure? So new technology, and that's that could feed into that technical hub where you're getting care in your house without going out to worry about it. Councillor Jones.
Thank you very much, Provost. Craig, thanks for the presentation. I'll just give you my questions rather than go into sort of detail. GPs, many of my constituents are telling me they still find it difficult to arrange appointments with their GPs, and I'm trying to understand what the difficulty is. And I know from personal experience that if I try to phone and get an appointment, it takes forever to get through on the phone, and if I walk into the doctor's practice to get an appointment, I'm told I can't make an appointment over the counter. So I'm just trying to understand why that is. Also, I see within the communication document that there was a campaign to reduce the number of people who did not attend at their GP appointments, and I'm just wondering, it would be good to have some statistics around that campaign and the success, if they actually managed to reduce the number. of those not attending GP appointments. On the strategy document, Leader already touched on it, so it's page 23, and it's the drug misuse. I mean, there's an increase of 34.8%. I appreciate these figures are from 2014 to 2018, but I would hope that you know, would start to turn around given the level of investment into these services, and just wondered if there was any indication that we're turning that around to be much more positive. Touching on carers, I note that personal carers, there's a 17.3% reduction in our carers who are SSSC qualified, and I'm just trying to understand why that's the case. And I'm hoping it's not to do with your comment about cutting learning and development, because if that's the case, then it's come back to bite us. And certainly after what our carers have come through in COVID, going by leaders' comments, certainly we need to do everything we can to show our caring employees that we absolutely value them. And so I'd really like to see more carers being able to access and gain that qualification.
Don't know if you can still hear us, Lillian, but you're frozen out. We can't hear you. Maybe we'll send a message. There you go.
Hello? Hello?
We missed about the last minute there.
Oh, right. So about the SSSC qualifications for carers, Provost, did you get that? No. Okay,
Yeah, we got that. Yep.
Yep. And on page 22, it's a positive statistic about less deaths for under 75s due to cancer. However, I'm thinking that coming out of COVID and with many people having late diagnosis of cancer, that's maybe being a downward trend. And I'm just looking for your views on that, Craig, and how we turn that around. Thanks.
Yep, through you, Provost. So I'll maybe just go through them in the order that you've asked. So GP access, ability to make appointments, we know, we absolutely recognise that that remains a challenge in certain areas, and maybe caveat that. So I think what we're hearing is some GP practices are better than others. So again, through our audit performance committee, we had a lengthy discussion about this the last time Vicky had brought an update report. There was an ask that we did a kind of deep dive round about it, so we're scoping that just now to understand what the challenges are, to look at it and try and identify where the opportunities to improve were around about that. So that work's ongoing in terms of scoping it out, and then the work will take place hopefully over the summer on it. In terms of the phone part of it, so again, I think we recognise there's some challenges around about phone systems, so we're making an investment across the GP telephony. Again, that's just been finally scoped just now, and hopefully again we'll roll out over the summer, and putting in new phone systems which will support queuing type facilities that will support diversions onto other areas. If they are busy, then the calls can be picked up by the primary care team. There can be recorded messages. So a different way of actually handling the phones, because we recognise that again in particular practices that is a real challenge. So the areas, specific areas you mentioned, we are trying to address and to deal with it. The bit about capacity within GPs, I think that's the area where there's perhaps a perception that there's unused capacity in there, that GPs can be seeing people and they're just not doing that. I think certainly the analysis that I've seen and we've looked at, that's certainly not the case. I think when you can compare the activity just before COVID to now, just after COVID, they are up. The number of GP consultations is significantly up, and the number of GPs or the GP hours that are available are down. So we're actually seeing many more people with a less capacity. And I think the last time I'd asked them, based on the average numbers that GPs are seeing, this is across Ayrshire, not East Ayrshire, but across the whole of Ayrshire and Arran, and based on the weekly number of consultations that are taking place, they're actually seeing in excess of 3 million, not necessarily seeing, they're consulting with in excess of 3 million people a year, which is a huge number. So I think that the level of activity is massive, but the the nuances round about what happens in particular practices is maybe something we need to explore a wee bit, which is what the work we'll do through the IJB's own audit performance committee, just to do that kind of deep dive and drill down into some of the specifics, understand what the challenges are, and then put up, if there is a specific problem, we can put a plan in place to support the contractors to actually improve and do things differently in there. But the telephony work, that's something that's taking place quickly, because I think it's something that is a particular area that does seem to be a concern, and there are some solutions out there that we can deploy and hopefully make a difference. So hopefully that should see a change in there in the short term. The campaign round about missed appointments, I think you'd probably all agree that that's something we should have done. But definitely is the right thing to do, because, and I don't have the data in terms of the numbers round about it, but I think anecdotally we do hear about the number of missed appointments that if you miss yours, that's the appointment that somebody else could have had. So that's absolutely the right thing to do. Was that a success, and what's the data look like? I don't know the answer to that, Councillor Jones, but I can certainly get the data round about it and feed that back to you in terms of what the campaign led to, and happy to do that. In terms of your final two, the question around about drugs misuse, are we in an improving situation in cancer deaths post-COVID? I think some of those stats are just maybe a bit too early, so to actually say this is what we're thinking, and I wouldn't want to put my neck line and say this is what I think it's going to be doing, but I think anecdotally, certainly around about the drugs deaths, I think we are seeing slightly less drug deaths this year than we have previously. Seen that for 1 year, I think it would be foolish to suggest that we've turned a corner. I think the fact it's better 1 year is really, really good. Sustaining that over the longer term is what we need to aspire to. So it definitely looks as if it's better this time. There's a lot more analysis required before we can confirm any of that. And the cancer death part of it, I think we all recognise, again, post-COVID, given the way some of the screening programmes changed, the way some of the early diagnostic stuff changed. There's lots of changes in there that will take a few years, I think, to filter through in terms of numbers, and we'll all probably watch that with interest just to see where we're going round about it. The post-diagnostic support round about cancer is changing as well, and I think that's where we as a health and social care partnership and the work we can do in the community, where all of that kicks in, and we're really keen that we can support people round about that. In terms of the cancer pathways and how people are supported into treatment, etc., we know there's some real challenges in there, and there's a lot of work going on within acute secondary care to try and understand what that is and make it better, and really try to turn a corner in there to try to address the waiting times, etc., for people to get either their first treatment or the initial diagnosis. So there's a lot of work going on in there. The final one, which is the carers' qualifications, and seen a bit of a dip in there. I think that's probably indicative of the fact that we've seen quite a big turnover. So a number of our more experienced carers have left. We've seen quite a big turnover, lots of new people coming in, which is good on one side, because you need to see that turnover. The fact we are able to recruit is really, really good, so people are coming and joining the organisation. But once they do join us, it takes a wee while for them to find their feet, to get into the job, and then to do the qualifications. So we don't insist on people being SSSC qualified to a certain level when they come in, but we would expect that we go through that qualification over a period of time. So I think this is just a consequence of the turnover within staff, new people joining the organisation. It'll take a wee bit of time for that to return. There's certainly not any suggestion that we're going to be withdrawing support for people to do that. I think the opposite would be true. We want to absolutely support our certainly our personal care workforce to be able to undertake those qualifications and to get the necessary SSSC qualification at the end of it also. That's, as I say, I think it's just a consequence of timing, given that there's been a bit of a turnover of staff in there, lots of new people joining the organisation. It'll just take a wee bit of time to filter back through again. I think I've covered all of them.
Yep. Amanda's online once in.
Yeah, thanks, Provost. It was just to follow up there on what Craig was saying about the SSSC. So there's a lot of different component parts to that. It's not only the turnover of staff. We get a lot of staff coming in, as Craig says, without the qualification. They might have came from another organisation, but there's a big piece of work going on just now, just setting up all the cohorts, and they're setting up an additional set of cohorts for emergencies, so that when we do recruit, if a number of people come in, because if they've been registered with the SSSC, they've got a time for them, not for the time they start it with us, to make sure that we can adhere to that. But it's not even just that we would be letting up on it. We have no option. If they're not registered and qualified within the times prescribed by the SSSC, they can't work in that profession. So it's a real priority for us to make sure that we get everybody through in the right time scale. Thanks, Provost.
Thanks, guys. Lillian, you want to come back?
Thanks, Provost. I'm just wondering, Craig, when you're saying there's a large turnover in our carers, I mean, and again, the question's already been asked by a couple of my councillor colleagues, what are we doing to try and retain retain our staff in the care profession within East Ayrshire?
So I think the turnover in that particular part of the workforce is not necessarily because people are leaving because they don't like the job anymore. I think what we've seen after COVID is a significant part of that area of the workforce who were of a certain age, having experienced some particular trauma, either in their own personal life or experienced and seen some of that within their work environment, were choosing to retire ultimately and to walk away. And that's absolutely fine. That's their choice. And as I say, they're reaching that age of and stage in their career anyway. I think what we still see within the workforce in terms of when you look at the age profile is that it is a workforce where that will happen. People will be coming of an age and they will retire. And it is a hard job. I think what we're seeing through, if you look at absence statistics, for example, you see increasing number of people off with MSK type issues. So it is a hard job. And as people get that a wee bit older, it becomes more and more difficult and challenging for them to do it. So I think people retiring and moving on is absolutely what you'd expect to see. Our challenge is to try and not just repeat those old, get people in of a similar age group again. What we're really keen to do is to make this a really attractive career choice, as I said previously, to get people in much younger, to support them through a whole sort of training environment and a career plan, a career pathway through that as well, so that they join us and they're here over the longer term. So I think turnover in this part, this isn't about people leaving because they're not happy and going for other jobs. Typically, it's about people retiring because they're of a particular age, and the new folk coming in at their back. It's just taking them a wee bit of time to go through the process, as Amanda described as well, in terms of the registration part of it. But the whole care at home part, how do we retain our staff through the social care learning hub, through trying to make it an attractive place to work, through terms and conditions, through pay. There's been a huge focus on that, and I think we have definitely turned a corner in there. I think when you look at the challenges for recruitment across the country, again, I think are punching above our weight. I think our local community has responded really well, and we do tend to get really good responses to our recruitment adverts. We do it in a different way. You'll have seen on the telly a number of our neighbours advertising the TV, come and work for us. It's a really good job. I don't know how successful that would be. We've had real success with putting a job advert in a shop window. So the person will go get their paper and their milk in the morning and they see an advert pinned in the shop window. For care at home staff, that's where we've seen the greatest success, is the really local advertising, that kind of hyper local stuff, rather than doing the big adverts, is where we've seen real success stories. So we'll continue to focus on that. We'll go to the recruitment events. We'll make it as streamlined and as easy as possible to come and work for us. And hopefully people, once they come in, they'll see what a good place it is to work, and they'll stay with us. It certainly seems to work at this point in time.
Thanks very much, Craig. Before Councillors Richardson, Holland and Maitland come in, I'll ask Eddie say a few words.
Thanks. I suppose I just wanted to expand a bit on that workforce discussion. Craig and Council so far, quite rightly, we've spoke about our workforce and our responsibilities as an employer to the workforce. But I think we need to remember that in our commissioning model, we commission a model where all our care homes are actually operated by the independent sector, and a vast majority of our work with adults, that's people with learning disabilities, etc., actually come from the voluntary sector. And actually Fair Work for the independent and voluntary sector are also essential parts of actually delivering social care here in East Ayrshire. And if you think about, when we talk about that, who the independent sector are and who the voluntary sector are, and I think during COVID we've seen this more than ever, the independent sector in East Ayrshire is local women providing care to our local residents as well. I know we don't employ them, and the same in the third sector. These are local folk providing that care. So that whole element that we talk about there of fair work and social care, it's quite right, as Craig's described, in terms of what we do, in terms of our responsibilities as an employer. But if this whole system's going to work, and if our communities and the women that work in our communities in the independent and third sector, that wider aspect in terms of fair work and social care also has to be looked at for them. So it's just when we step back, a bit what Katie was saying, step back a bit and you look at the wider aspect. Yes, we need to take absolutely into account our role as employers. One of the challenges, if I was sitting here with some of my colleagues who are in the independent sector, is the better our terms and conditions, actually the bigger challenge it is for them, because they train people and then they all leave there and they come to us and then they're back into that cycle. And our challenge then is we don't have a stable support service, for our older people in care homes. So they're the types of things that we need to look at, and the IJB I know looks at in terms of commissioning strategy, and why sitting right on the IJB are representatives of the third and the independent sector there as well, to actually give that perspective too. I would just expand a bit in terms of that whole care sector and fair work right across our communities.
Thanks for that, Eddie. With Councillor Richardson.
Thanks, Provost. It was just really to come back to Councillor McGee. I thought John made some really good points, high-level points specifically about pensions. We won't be able to solve this in this room, but I just wanted to make a few observations because pensions have become a subject close to my heart because of some of the advisory boards that Dougie put me forward for and I've been serving on, so I've been learning a wee bit about the pension side of things. But John made some brilliant points, and he said something that struck when he said billions of pounds can be found when we have to. Now, obviously, we had Liz Truss for a wee while there as the Prime Minister, and her and our Chancellor made some decisions that meant, I think the Bank of England had to find something like £40 billion to actually stop some pension funds from going bust. So, where I'm going to go with this is the Conservative and Unionist Party, they're pretty good at finding people within the community that they can concentrate on and kind of vilify a wee bit. And surprisingly, some of those folk just after COVID were people who have worked close on 40 years, coming up to the age of 55, who decided to access their pension pots that they've worked hard for to save the money into so that they can retire early. But if you've noticed in the media, the Tories, I'll call them the Tories, because I think the definition of that is robbers, they now want to try and force these people who saved for close on 40 years of work back into work, even though that they've saved up pensions that they can actually live on and retire. And it actually all comes into this well-being. If you've worked for close on 40 years and you've saved some money away, then and you can afford to retire at 55, then you should be allowed to retire at 55 and not have a government trying to force you back to work. The other point is, I'll be lucky, I'll be able to access my pension funds at 55 because I was born in 1970. But already, if I'd have been born a few years later, that age is actually already going to change in the coming years. You won't be able to access it at 55. I think it's going to 57 or 58 already. And that trend is only going one way. That brings me on to the state pension, John. There's never been a sinking fund or an investment fund in the UK to fund state pensions. The national insurance that we all pay today goes into a pensioner's pocket tomorrow. Now, looking at these figures, if you take that across the UK, state pension age is 67. Where's it going to be in 10 years' time? There's only one answer. State pension age is going up the way. Now, I've laid into the Tories a wee bit there. I'm not going to let Labour off, because in 2014, Labour had activists chapping the doors telling the Scottish people that their pensions were safe. Well, I'm sorry, but they're not getting a pension at 65. Depending on their age, they're probably not even getting one at 67. So the UK as a whole has got a massive problem with pensions. And could an independent Scotland do a wee bit better? I think we probably could.
Thank you. Councillor Holland.
Thanks, Provost. Thanks, Craig, for the report. My question's about the digital connections that you're talking about. I work for the NHS and I work a wee bit with the tech team in digital services, and so therefore I'm aware of some of the systems that they're bringing forward, and I think it's great. My concern and my question to you is, what about the ones that can't embrace it? Because one of the systems that I'm involved with, I'm seeing more and more people that they're struggling to use the system, so they go back to the manual, and that's fine just now. Is there always going to be an alternative for everything for people who either can't or won't embrace an online service?
Through you, Chair. So I think yes has to be the answer to that, particularly for healthcare. There needs to be a safety net in there. We need to know that if somebody can't use it or won't use it for whatever reason, that there's a safety net service in there that we can always provide an alternative. I think going forward, what we're increasingly seeing is the use of tech to keep people safe. sometimes doesn't require, I don't mean they're engaged, that sounds as if we're doing something to them, but it doesn't require them to actively engage in it. So I think the Provost mentioned earlier about a watch that can tell your temperature, your heartbeat, and knows if you're falling, etc. And that will trigger a response to a community alarm centre somewhere else. That's the kind of thing we're talking about, and I really trying to get that almost at a population level that becomes normal. The same way as a community alarm is normal for people to press a button. That's use of tech, and it triggers a response for people. So that's a bit we're really keen to put in place. When you start to get into the more, how do you actually request a service, or how do you go online and do things, and that becomes challenging for particular parts of our community, and we know that. And this isn't just in health and social care. I think Joe spoke before about this in terms of customer services across council services as well, and we'd always want to make sure that we did have that safety net in there. We've done a lot of work with Joe and some of these teams as well around about how do we get that digital literacy improved, how do we get people with access to devices, how do we make sure that folk, once they've got devices, have got access to data tariffs that are affordable, or if they can't afford it at all, that we can provide it for them. So there's a whole range of things in there that we can do to support that. But ultimately, if people are unable to, and there will be still people out there who are unable to for a whole range of different reasons, then we need to make sure that there is an alternative in place. If we can get tech embedded and enabled for 90%, talking sake of the population, what's left to deal with the 10% will still be a huge improvement of where we are just now in terms of efficiency. To still be able to do a manual process for some people will be the right thing to do, but we can still have a hugely much more efficient process than we have currently by using tech in its best possible way. So it won't be one size fits all. There will need to be alternatives in there for people. Can I guarantee forever that we'll always have a safety net for every single thing? I don't think we can end. We could say that, but I think what we need to make sure is that whatever we put in place, we know that there's a good, safe, sustainable alternative for people. The use of tech is not just for individuals as well, so better use of tech for our workforce can make them much more efficient as well. But with some of the same challenges in there around about digital literacy and how can people, our own workforce, be supported to use digital in a very different way. So we're pursuing that as well. So, and again, for our personal care workforce, for example, there's an awful lot of double handle care in there at this point in time, which is it's necessary for those individuals, but it's also very expensive, as you can imagine, and very difficult at this time in terms of resourcing that. So better use of tech can start to address some of those double handling issues as well, and start to make us as a workforce much more efficient. So there's two sides to it, but there's two very different approaches about how do you support people who feel unable to, and it's done in a really supportive way to try and encourage that.
Thanks, Linda. That's a good one. Councillor Maitland.
Thank you. In a moment, I'm just going to go into something related to what Linda said. I'd like to say thank you very much for the report, Craig. I do think we work compassionately and in partnership, and I just want to pull out a little thing from that perhaps makes it a bit more human. And one of the exercises that came out that one of the things people really didn't like doing was having to explain their situation or who they cared for multiple times. It's soul destroying. And you also feel you're not being listened to, and it adds to the stress of your own care or for looking after somebody else. And I was wondering if one of the answers to that, is a digital answer that we can put through NHS systems so that, staff are related. Every single time, for example, I phone somebody in Glasgow looking after my father, I have to explain the situation all over again. And I have to prove I've got advocacy to do that. And I have to put a deaf man with dementia on the phone to agree for me to act for him. So little things like that, if we could get rid of those. So that's the compassionate side of us. And that's why I was very interested to hear what Linda had to say about the digital. Two more things. One is, Joe, is 2% enough? I know you probably don't think it is, but is 2% enough for reserves when we're facing the financial situation we're in? And another small point, and it's about the Leisure Trust, and it's not all about making money in the Leisure Trust. We have two hats. We serve our communities and we are an income source. And the review we're doing just now, I hope will reflect on that. And when we were talking about libraries have changed so much. Everyone talks about closing libraries, but actually our e-libraries are through the roof. So do people actually want to use the spaces as libraries? We saw in the 80s and 90s, they moved over to music. So there's other ways of using our library spaces are also used now for job search, etc. So that was just thoroughly agreed with what John said earlier as well. Sorry, just one last point when it came to recruitment. Post-Brexit, we know how much we lost in the NHS, and these people are not being replaced. staff-wise, but we lost 10% in Scotland of our social care staff straight away, immediately, 10%. And now we're 7 years down the line, and that's an accumulative effect. So the recruitment problem is not going to go away. So I'm glad we've spent so much time discussing recruitment, but just a few points. Thank you.
So thank you for your points, Councillor Maitland. I think there was just a few observations in there that I don't necessarily want to respond to, but I think is 2% reserves enough? I think Joe and I would probably agree, no, it's never going to be enough. The challenge, however, is to make your reserve, to make reserves bigger. You need to carve money out of the budget to put into reserves, and that's not, given the challenges we're facing. I think we'd much all rather spend the money on frontline services than putting money by just in case. So 2% reserves is probably just about enough to get by with, but I think we'd all be happier if it was much more than that, but that would then present real challenges around about service delivery that I don't think any of us would want to see. You said digital, just picking up on both yourself and Councillor Holland's comment. So part of the money we got from the government a couple of years ago in relation to systems investment, we've carved a bit of that out to try and identify how can we get our systems to work better together. So council systems, health systems almost have that joint record as the kind of holy grail, but an opportunity where if you do tell the story once it's in one system and then you get it referred somewhere else, that record follows you so that the story passes about all about the place. It sounds dead easy, but everybody's been pursuing this for years and years and years, and it's incredibly challenging. Not least of the technical part of it sounds quite challenging, but the information governance and how you actually share information across these organisations is challenging as well. I'm involved in a national group called Digital Front Door, which is how do you actually look at this at a national level. Digital Front Door is you as a citizen could go for any health and social care service, and there's a digital platform you go into, and you can access all your services from it. And I say that's the holy grail, but they're keen they're going to have this up and running within a year. We've been looking at it for 20 years and we've not got very far on it, so it'll be dead interesting to see how that progresses. And it'll be all about money. Ultimately, whatever we're doing there is going to have a huge investment required to get it up and running, but I don't think anybody's shy of ambition round about it. I think everybody recognises it's definitely the way to go, and there's a whole range of benefits round about it, not least of which patient safety, because once the story's in there, everybody sees it, everybody can share it, appropriate people can see and share it, and that can only be good for patient outcomes. But the point you're making about telling your story multiple times, that's came through loud and clear in all of our engagement events, and we do need to find a better way of not asking people to do that.
Okay. Yeah, Leader.
A small point, just to reflecting on what Claire said and what Lillian said earlier about digitisation, and I think we've got a lot. We know too much effort really brush up and help GP surgeries. With digitisation, just make it a more logical way of booking appointments and communicating with folk and just sorting that out. We've got the tools. We should be able to bring it into 2023 because it was a point well made by both. Thanks.
Councillor Adams.
Thank you, Provost. It's a question for Craig. Craig, thanks very much for the report. Like everyone else, it's very good and a high quality piece of work. The question I have is in relation to the GP surgeries, and it's been noted within the meeting, the difficulty in getting appointments. The question I've got is how much influence as a local authority do we have in relation to the opening hours of GP practices? For example, my GP surgery, it's just mine is 8:30 to 5:30 and it closes at lunchtime for an hour. My health's with me every day, 24/7, and everybody's the same. So in this day and age, I'm not sure if it's responsible for us to have a GP surgery that closes at 5:30 and closes Saturdays and Sundays. If I want a hair appointment, it's a private sector business, I can get that in an evening or a weekend. I know you're aware of one of our colleagues who requested documents for a family member on a Friday afternoon and was told, well, we're closed Saturday, Sunday, you can't get them till Monday. And that's an unfortunate incident, but it highlights a problem that I think we've got. So the question I have is, how much influence do we have as a local authority in negotiating the opening hours of GP practices?
So I suppose the easy answer to that is very little as a local authority. So the health board hold the contract so that all of our GPs are independent contractors, and the contract's held by the NHS. There's a GMS contract, so the GPs operate under a contracted arrangement, which does specify what they should open, when they should open, etc. There's a local enhanced service often in place with practices round about extended hours, but that's typically maybe a day a week or a couple of days a week where they might have open till maybe 7 o'clock at night, and it's up to the individual contractors to decide if they want to do that, and they get paid a bit extra for doing that to have extended opening hours, recognising, as you say, that a number of people won't be able to get to a GP appointment in normal working hours because they work themselves. So that provides a bit of flexibility earlier or later in the day. So other than that, and I say that's negotiated through the contract itself with NHS. Beyond that, there's very little scope to change it. I think increasingly what we are hearing is that the flexibility that people would desire to see and to contact GPs and dentists, because remember they're part of the same sort of primary care part as well of it. It's changing, and I think that's a challenge that's out there. There's a whole range of challenges around about the GMS contract with GPs, which is proving incredibly challenging just now, around about how that can be delivered, how changes can be delivered in there. But that's not to say that we shouldn't keep, as a system, we shouldn't keep trying to encourage and support and make sure that type of flexibility and responsiveness would be there. But at this point in time, within the current contractual arrangements, there's very little scope to influence it at all.
If we could just come back in, how much influence we have over the contract then, Craig?
It's a national contract, so we locally have very little. So we're able to influence it in terms of part of the negotiating committee. They'll come and they'll seek views and they'll seek opportunities for people to feed in and ask round about it. But beyond that, there's no flexibility. The local enhanced service, so an individual GP may decide to offer a local enhanced service round about it. So that gives you slightly different local nuances, but the core part of the contract is a national GMS contract that's in place. It's all negotiated, you can imagine, through BMA and other sources. So it's a really complex piece of work to change anything within that.
Thanks for that. Folks, that is a very good discussion. That was over an hour and 40 minutes with discussion on a very, very important topic. And I hope, Doctor, that it's been informative for you, and it shows you how serious we take healthcare in our communities, with all of the officers and the members having a real interest in making our constituents' lives better. And we really appreciate you coming along. Members, the recommendations, page 64. And can we note the contents of the report?
Yeah.
Thank you very much. Thanks, Craig, Amanda, and Marion, for your inputs there. Members, I hope you have a great weekend. Please stay safe. And we're going to hand over to Katie now for her valedictory speech. I know you're going to do it again, but let's hear what you've got to say.
Well, it wouldn't be a speech at all, because you got me on the hop and I haven't been drinking gin, so I would have been a bit better if I had been. But no, I just wanted to say to all of you that I've worked it out that I've attended over 100 full council meetings. So I've been in this chamber those many times, and in the former Games Hall when we started here in 1996. And I've always said this is a sacred space, and it's part of this democratic process that I'm so proud to be part of. And I think you've taken really big decisions here in terms of new buildings and houses and transformation and changing things. But most importantly, you've taken decisions really to help better serve the people out in our communities. And so it's been a magical space. We don't make decisions as officers. We make recommendations to you, and you debate them and we refine them. And so I'm so fortunate and blessed to be part of that democratic process. Some of our decisions have been groundbreaking and really courageous. And I think that's what sets us apart in the whole of the UK. I'm not just biased. I go a lot of places and I talk about how brilliant this place is. And people say to me, why is it different in East Ayrshire? Why is it different? It's just a wee council in Scotland. It's landlocked. What's different about it? And I've thought about this over the years, and it's absolutely a progressive and innovative space. So we've always encouraged people to have ideas, even if they sound wacky to begin with, and then we've talked them through, and we've, in this room, even with councillor conversations, you've shaped policy. So it isn't about somebody in a darkened room sitting doing something and saying to you, we want you to approve this. All of you, I would hope you would hear your voices over the years in the policies that we've developed. And I think the thing that really sets us apart and makes us successful is our kindness and the way that we interact with each other. It's about trust and relationships. Yep, in this chamber it is a sacred space, and sometimes it's a theatre. for good and bad because of the democratic process, but also the political process. You've got your differences, but every one of you is united. I know absolutely. You wanted to be elected. You put yourself out there because you care deeply about the communities you serve. And I think we've really embedded that here about being kind, about relationships being important. And when we disagree, it's about being respectful about disagreeing and finding a way forward together that is not about us and our ego, but about the people that we serve. So you might feel really strongly about something, and it might stem from a political or with a big or small p view. But at the end of the day, we've been able to collaborate and have consensus in these chambers. And I really just want to end with a note of to say it's been great to be part of that. It's part of something special. It's not like this in other places. But a note of caution that as we move into more troubled waters, and we've been through a lot, but we're going into the most troubled waters yet, because as we said at CMT the other day, we're dealing with the third and fourth harms of COVID. We forget it at our peril. You know, the first harm was about getting COVID and dying, and the second one was about the impact in the wider economy. But we're now seeing delayed health, as we heard earlier on, people getting things diagnosed late, and people, excess deaths going through the roof. Behaviours changing, the fourth harm about people's well-being and about young people being more involved in things because they were so suppressed for so long. And at our peril, we would then separate out into our silos and into our different political areas. We must keep our eye on the ball here. And whilst we disagree, in that space of respectful disagreement, we must help to find a way forward. And I know you'll all do that. And I thank you from the bottom of my heart for knowing all of you, for developing really strong relationships with many of you, really good, strong working relationships, and even personal ones. There's people in here that we send each other on a Friday a copy of the alcohol that we might be drinking on that Friday evening at the end of a long and hard week. So some of you I would love to keep in touch with, but there's been members throughout the years that have formed my development and made me realise that we are a very, very special place. And please continue to be kind to each other, even when you don't disagree, because even when you disagree, because at the end of the day, the people that we serve, the decisions you make in here will change their lives forever. So thank you. I'll say more next Friday when there's unicorns and maybe some singing, but this is about the chamber. And I remember Fiona Lee saying to me, Katie, officers need to stay quiet at full council. It's about the members. This is the political space. And I've always listened to that. So I've talked too much already because it's in my DNA to shut up at this one. So thanks very much, guys.
Folks, if there's anyone can't make next Friday, because I know some are really busy, if they'd like to say something just now, I mean, a few words absolutely proper if you want, or will we wait to next week with cake? Cake. I think that's better. Thanks, Katie. Thanks, folks. Have a good weekend. Thank you.